What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. So glad you're with me. This is actually, as I'm recording this, the first podcast of this year. So I've been thinking about this, the format of this podcast, which I love. You ask me anything you want. We've been doing this since 2017 together. Email me, podcast@grangersmith.com. And the last time we were together last week, I was thinking through a question on how do you make the last podcast of the year, and so I made it a reflective podcast where I would ask the question: if I were single and starting over, what would I do? And that way I can kind of look back and go, well, this is maybe in a way, this is the advice I would give myself back, if I could start over. This is what I would want to do. And so this podcast is now we're looking forward. Maybe this could be a visionary type podcast where instead of saying, if I could start over, this is what I would do. Instead, I should answer the question that we should all be asking: how can I grow this year? And you could define grow in many ways. You could make the size of the growth. That's up to you. I would say, as long as it's something, as long as it's a little bit more than it was last year. You guys, most of you know, I grow these little trees at my house. A lot of times I'll grow oak trees from acorns, which it's an interesting social experiment, because if you grow a tree from an acorn, you will never get to enjoy the shade of that tree. I mean, it would take 30 years to truly enjoy the great shade of a great oak tree. But we plant them anyway. And what I'm looking for from those little saplings, year by year, is growth. Sometimes on those oak trees, it's interesting, because sometimes, like I have a Monterey oak, and I'm like, man, I don't know what it's done since last year. And then sometimes you go out there and you go, yeah, I think it got 4 or 5 feet taller this year. And so sometimes it's inches and sometimes it's feet, but as long as it's growing, that's the question that I want to ask in this podcast. You could another way you could look at it is, what are you building in 2025? So let's talk about foundations. Let's talk about disciplines. Let's talk about our ability to have some kind of forethought of self-control. We'll put it that way. And typically I answer your questions, podcast@grangersmith.com. So email those. Go ahead and send your questions and be thinking through it as you're listening to this one. And Ant-Man will take those and put them together and we'll produce a ton of shows with it. But in the meantime, this is going to be kind of a visionary podcast looking forward. Okay. Last week was a reflective one. So I put together 10 little titles here that we can go over and dissect. I put these 10 thoughts together. This is not a definitive list, meaning this isn't the 10 items that you need to know if you're going to build a foundation into 2025. And also I say 2025. My hope is that this podcast will be listened to many more years into the future than that. So if you're listening and you think this is relative to 2025 and you're listening in 2029, that is not true. This should be a general ideas for growing in any given year. Okay, so not a definitive list. These are 10 items. We're just going to go through this, and I made the list, and then I didn't really think through it. So you're gonna think through with me, and I will say I have done this quite a bit, but nonetheless it is still a bit difficult to sit in a room by myself for 40 minutes and talk to myself. So don't think that the ideas are just going to flow like crazy, because that's something I'm still working on. As many episodes as I've done. My number one thing I have here is to answer the question, how can we grow in the new year? Okay, that's the question for all these. Number one, start with a foundation that lasts. Okay? So every structure, we know this, needs a strong foundation, needs a solid foundation, or it won't last. For Christians, we know that foundation is Christ. And for people that are unsure about your faith, or you don't have a faith, it doesn't take away the fact that you still have to ask that question. What is your life built on? Right? I have seen through the years that we all have something. We all have a religion. We all worship something. So for the people that say, Granger, I don't have a faith like you do, or I'm not religious like you do, you just watch their life for just a little bit, even if it's just the updates they make on Facebook, and you can learn real quick what their religion is. I don't do this often, but I will say that sometimes someone will give me like a critique or a negative comment on social media, or something. Maybe it's something like profoundly theological that tries to contradict something I said. And like I said, I don't always do this, but sometimes I'll go to their page to see what their foundation is. Like, where's this person coming from? This person's making this bold claim, telling me I'm wrong, or they're telling me they're standing with me in agreement with whatever I said. And I go to their page to see what their foundation is, and I quickly see it. I go, oh, it's NASCAR, or it's politics, or it's conspiracy theories, or it's youth baseball, or it's the Boston Red Sox, or it's Bon Jovi. I mean, whatever it is, you'll see it. You could do this little experiment, all of you, if you have either look at yourself or look at someone else and go, what is their religion? And go to their social media account, if they have one, and just scan through the last month worth of post, and you'll start to see a pattern. No one is random. I have not met anyone or seen anyone that's totally random, that just says something about the weather here, and then this time they're talking about golf, and then now they're talking about their family, and then now they're talking about President Trump, and then now they're like, no one is random. Everyone has a pattern, and they kind of go in and out of that pattern, but they keep it. We all need a strong, solid foundation, a foundation that lasts. So if you look at your religion, like I said, Christians, we would say this is Christ himself, and the Bible says it's him. And we know that in terms of this world this life we're living now is temporal, is temporary, that we have an everlasting kingdom that we look forward to. Although that doesn't take away from the fact that we have work to do today. But if that's not you, and I'm so glad you're listening to this podcast, but if that's not you, take a quick accounting of whatever your worship is. Maybe you don't like that word. I don't mind using it, but whatever your interest, your prime interest is, and it might be your family. That's interesting. Your prime interest of a person without a specific faith, your prime interest or religion might be your family. Like everything is family, family, family. And that's tough. That's tough to build a foundation on family. That I believe family is something that goes on top of a firm foundation. In fact, family stays together, finds unity upon a firm foundation. Because if family is your foundation, then when life comes at you and someone dies or moves away or gets a divorce or any other variety of family separating things, you're in a lot of trouble. And it's the same thing with any other kind of foundation. So take an accounting of whatever your religion is, and ask yourself, is this a foundation that lasts? And very well, you might have a good argument that it does. Okay? Number 2, focus on what truly matters. Now, why did I write that down? Because in this noisy, distracted world, it is so easy to chase what is urgent instead of what is important. I'll probably say this several times on this podcast, but I was thinking about this before I started recording. We don't know, none of us do, how this year is going to go. Just like I didn't know how my 2019 was going to go when I celebrated New Year's in 2019, not knowing that would be a massive catalyst, a massive turning point in my life. Just a few months in, I would lose my son, which would start a chain reaction of cleaning house, you could say. My life, the house was cleaned. Some furniture was tossed out, leading to another death in early 2020, which was the death of myself. We don't know going into this year if this year is going to be another catalyst year for me or you. But here's what I do know. There are a large amount of people listening right now that this year is going to be, you're going to have some crazy things happen. Likely, there will be much loss. There will be much heartache. There will be babies born and grandpas dying. There will be miracles, and there will be cancer diagnosis. There will be new jobs, and there will be divorces. There will be horrific car collisions, and there will be seemingly miracle medical cures. And most people will fall right in between. But we need to understand this, that going into this year, this might be, you might be right around the corner from the biggest trial of your life. And I'll probably get to that here in a bit. But if you don't have that foundation that truly lasts, if you don't have a focus on what truly matters, that's going to determine how this trial is going to go for you. If there's going to be growth from it, or if it's going to be something that shatters everything that you've built. So in this noisy, distracted world, number 2, it's easy to chase what feels urgent instead of what's important. And so we should ask the question, what matters? This is interesting. If you think about what matters, it's not always what makes you happy. We can't think of, and I've heard people say this on my radio program after midnight. People have said, you know what, this year, Granger, I'm going to start doing what makes me happy. I've lived my whole life for everyone else, and it's only burned me. And so now I'm going to live for myself, and I'm going to do what truly makes me happy. Now, the Bible's going to say the opposite. The Bible's going to say that you are wired to serve, to love others. You are wired to love others as yourself. And if you do that, because that's the way you were built, then you will feel peace, joy, comfort in that, because that's your primary function. And the more you isolate yourself from that, cut yourself from that, and instead serve yourself, the more empty you feel. That might sound crazy, but when you put it to the test, it works like this every time. Look at Hollywood. Look at the community of people that have given up everything to serve themselves, to indulge themselves, to buy things for themselves, to build a kingdom for themselves. And where do they end up? Happy? No, we don't ever see that example. Where do you see happiness? Think of the most secular documentary on Netflix, whatever it might be. It's whenever you see true happiness, it's the people that are serving. In fact, they've also connected that with longevity of life. So the most centurions, I think that's how you say it, the people that have lived over 100, when they find those people, they go, what was that documentary? It was like the blue zones or something like that, where they went and found where the oldest people living over 100 in the world were. And every time they found a community, it was the same thing. They're living together in close-knit community, serving each other, not a lot of excess. Of course, they were eating healthy, but a product of eating healthy was they were cooking together, enjoying meals together, breaking bread together, being outdoors together. It's interesting. So when we think about what truly matters, it's not about what makes us happy. Not always. Sometimes it's a product. Happiness is sometimes a product, but not always. For example, if a friend calls me that I went to high school with, and he says, Granger, my dad died. And I said, man, I'm so sorry to hear that. And he says, yeah, man, we're really torn up about it. And the funeral's Monday. Can you make it? 11 a.m., 3-hour drive from where you are. And I said, my flesh says, my first thought is, Monday's so busy. I've got so much going on Monday. And I was actually going to use that day to get some work done and relax. You're thinking this? But now this guy's saying, can you drive 3 hours there and 3 hours back to go to this funeral? It's going to be kind of depressing. It's definitely not what's fun. That's definitely not the fun thing to do. And that's definitely not the thing that's going to make me happy. Like if I'm chasing things that are going to make me happy, going to that funeral is not one of them. But out of my day on Monday, that's what matters. That's the investment that matters. Not because it fills me with joy or anything, but because by serving, by loving, that's the thing that you add those kind of events up in 2025 and you're going to look back and go, that year was worth it. I grew, I had growth in the year, right? It's going to be those type of things. So we need to avoid thinking about chasing things for happiness. Focus on what truly matters. Number 3, invest in people, not just projects. That's an interesting thought. Accomplishments are awesome. We should strive for success in all areas of life. And I say that because you don't want to strive for mediocrity in anything, whether it's selling widgets or loving your wife. You don't want to, I want to strive to be middle of the ground. No, it's like, I want to succeed in this. I want to be great in this. But we could all agree that true joy comes from the people that love and serve, whether that's family, neighbors, or someone that you meet along the way that's in need. We should look at this year as a way to grow. We should look at opportunities to pour into others selflessly. And this is what Jesus modeled for us. Valuing people over programs or systems. That's something to keep in mind.
I would imagine there's a lot of people listening right now that want to start a new business in 2025. That's the goal. You might be thinking, let's do this. Now is the time. 2025 is my year. And I love that. And like most businesses in 2025, you're going to have an online presence. You're going to need an e-store and a way for customers to check out using their credit card. Have you thought through that yet? Well, if not, I want to introduce you to Shopify. I've used it for many years now with my brothers Tyler and Parker over at yee.com. And Shopify makes it so easy for us so that we don't have to worry about the checkout. Instead, we can think about the creative things that we're actually selling, right? So the best time to start your new business is right now. And Shopify makes it easy to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates, no coding or design skills required at all. All you need to do is drag and drop. And then their powerful social media tools let you connect all your channels and create shoppable posts and help you sell everywhere that people scroll. So what happens if you don't act now? Well, you regret it. What if someone else beats you to the idea, right? Well, don't kick yourself when you hear me say this same thing next year and you didn't do anything now. With Shopify, your first sale is closer than you think. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Granger, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Granger to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/Granger. If you want to get a hold of me, an easy way to do it is cameo.com/Granger Smith. Cameo.com/Granger Smith. You could order a video message from me saying whatever customizable message you want me to say. Happy birthday, happy anniversary, maybe a word of encouragement, whatever it might be. I think it's a pretty good gift, especially for people you just don't know how to buy for. Get them a Cameo from me at cameo.com/Granger Smith.
Moving on in this list, answering the question that we should all be asking, how can I grow in this new year? Number 4, I wrote this down, be a giver, not a consumer. Man, isn't that true? I need to, by the way, this list is for me. So don't think that this is like me preaching to anybody. This list is for me. So many times, don't we fall into this trap that we consume, and we don't contribute anything? You know, we are just in a consumer society. We do this, whether it's our relationships. I'm convinced this is why divorce is so prevalent, because we take these marriage vows, sickness or poor, or sickness or health, or rich or poor, better or worse. We say these things, but we don't mean it. That's why divorce is so prevalent. We say them, and then as soon as we stop getting what we want, because we're consumers, we've been trained this way. That's in a relationship. And if a husband and wife, if one of them reaches a point where they can't consume anymore because they're not getting anything, they're like, I'm not happy. I want to move on. I have fallen out of love. We've lost the idea of commitment in that sense. And so that goes into everything else. It goes into church life. We so many times at church become consumers of the church service. Feed me, entertain me. If not, I'm going to another church. You know, this is every aspect of life. Kids, we're constantly training our kids to be consumers, and we are the ones feeding them with the consumption as parents, which is wrong. And we shouldn't teach our kids that way. Things should be earned, you know. You should be a contributor to society. And then you consume as it comes in your share. This is an idea that humans have always known. We've really lost it. The world teaches us this, to consume more, to hoard more, to always seek more. You know, Jesus just flips that idea upside down. Jesus taught it's more blessed to give than receive. Paul tells us this in Acts 20:35. So this year we should focus on giving. And maybe that word could be misunderstood. Generosity. Your time, your talents, your resources. Give more than we receive. Be a giver, not a consumer. Number 5, choose forgiveness over bitterness. How many people need to hear that? Forgiveness is in many ways a choice. bitterness in many ways, disgruntledness in many ways, is a choice. Circumstances are not. We can't control the circumstances, the things that happen to us, the things that other people say to us, the events that happen upon us, we cannot control. But we can control how we respond to these events. And that includes forgiveness. Choosing in this year to grow through the choice of forgiveness in replacement of being bitter. Because you have a choice between the two. You want to forgive this person, or do you want to be bitter about it? Not misunderstanding forgiveness for acceptance, or don't misunderstand forgiveness for trust. I forgive you, therefore I trust you. You don't have to do that. I can forgive a rattlesnake for biting me, but that doesn't mean I trust the rattlesnake that if I put it back in its den, I'm going to walk by the rocks and it's not going to jump out at me again. So forgiveness is a heart position that we choose to release. I forgive you. I don't hold this grudge against you. I will no longer be bitter. Holding on to these grudges, we all know, I don't have to convince you, holding on to grudges weighs us down. So whether that's forgiving others or seeking forgiveness, both of those things, we should go into this year letting go of bitterness and embracing the freedom that comes from grace. Number 6, live with purpose, but not just productivity. It's a little bit of what I've already been talking about, but it's easy to fill our calendar and still feel empty. How you doing, man? Busy, but empty. Instead of productivity, it's like you could be very productive and still be empty and still feel like you're just a hamster on a wheel, right? But if you choose to live with purpose, and that goes back to a couple of other things we've already talked about, but choosing to live with purpose, doing the meaningful things. What did I say earlier? Focusing on what truly matters. Investing in people, not just products. Our projects. Start with a foundation that lasts. Be a giver, not a consumer. Choose forgiveness over bitterness. And that goes right into live with purpose, not just productivity. Because instead of being busy, we should ask the question, yes, I'm busy, but am I busy with a purpose? Am I being purposeful in my busyness? Otherwise, you are spinning your wheels, and this life is a vapor, and it will be gone. And you will look back one day and go, what have I done? What have I done? For Christians, that purpose comes from glorifying God and loving others. But for anybody that's not a Christian or anyone else listening, it would still be worth asking yourself, as on this topic, it would be worth asking, what's my purpose beyond the day-to-day grind, right? Number 7, embrace rest, not just hustle. So that number 7 has to go with number 6. Live with purpose, not just productivity, and then embrace the rest, not just hustle. I've had to learn the last few years, because there's several people in my sphere that work with me that have access to my calendar, and they will fill my calendar. So my publicist will fill my calendar. My brother Tyler can fill my calendar. Ant-Man can fill my calendar. Paul, Amber. There's a crew. Chris Lee. There's a crew that could at any time go in there and say, at 11 a.m., Granger has an interview on this person's radio show or whatever. So I had to learn a few years ago that I needed to schedule rest. So I literally put in all caps, hold for rest. So it'd be like on the 18th, 19th, and 20th, I'll block all 3 days. It says hold for rest. And I'll do that when I glance at the calendar and I'm looking forward and I see there's a lot of different things I have to do, maybe a lot of travel, or it could be just a few things I have to do, but they're heavy thinking things. And I know coming out of that, or another way is I'm going into a bunch of heavy thinking things, then I should give you an example. An example would be there is some kind of production company that wants to come to my house and interview me about River or the ministry, something like that. And they're gonna be here for 5 hours. And that's a heavy thinking thing, because that's gonna put me. It's a joy to do that. It's a joy to share my testimony, but that would put me in a position where I'm just kind of drained afterward. So the next day I need to hold for rest in my calendar. Instead of just being busy, we should always ask, am I living with purpose? Yeah. But whenever this world glorifies burnout, right? Jesus invites us to rest. So we should build a rhythm of work and rest that honors health, family, according to God's design for our life. So important. I don't think anyone's going to look back on their life and go, I wish I wouldn't have rested so much. I don't think anyone's going to say that. And I think we would be shocked to know that the more we rested and the more our battery recharged, the more productive we would have been if we would have blocked for days of rest. And by the way, I do that, hold for rest, but I probably don't do it nearly enough. So this is something I'm going to lean into. Number 8, speak life into others. Words have power. This year, we should commit to speaking encouragement. I say words have power, and that's probably a massive understatement. We should speak encouragement, truth, love into the lives around us, into those people, and not just the people that matter the most, but we should be the person that speaks encouragement and life and love and truth consistently, where we get to be known as the person that does that. So whether that's the person in the drive-through window or the person at the person at the church sitting next to you, or your own wife, in the greatest span of all the people that are around us, we should be the people that hold back from speaking things that tear down. You remember people say this all the time, that my grandma used to tell me, if I can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. There is something so true about that. And although not saying anything at all could equally get you in trouble sometimes, it's typically the better option. It's always the better option than tearing someone down. Because, as we said it just a few points ago, number 5, choose forgiveness over bitterness. How many times does this forgiveness, choosing forgiveness over bitterness, come from, the necessity comes from some words that were spoken in anger, some words that were spoken as someone else tore someone down? In this podcast, as I answer questions, so much of what I answer is based on someone tore somebody down with words. If someone spoke out of pride or anger or resentment or impatience or misunderstanding, but they spoke with anger. So we should speak life. Proverbs 18:21 reminds us that the tongue has the power of life and death. Choose life this year. Number 9, expect challenges but look for growth. This year, and I said a little bit earlier, this year will have challenges for all of us. I'm not some kind of freaky prophet, but I can tell you right now, you will have extreme challenges this year. I encourage so many times people to journal. I use an app called Day One. I believe that that costs money. I believe there's a small monthly fee. So I'm willing to pay the monthly fee because it's so convenient. Day One, it queues the next day up for me. It stores everything really nicely on the cloud. I could quickly access what happened in the years previous right there. But you certainly don't have to use it. You could use any kind of note-taking app. I actually recommend digital over spiral notebooks because I think for me, the most important thing about journaling is keeping and reading the previous years, because that's what gives you the perspective. So as we go through challenges that sometimes feel like the whole world is caving in on us, we could read and look back and in subsequent years and say, it wasn't that big a deal. Or it was a big deal, and I saw the strength that it took to get through it, and it worked. And so you can encourage yourself, your old self. Sometimes I'll ask myself, my future self, questions in the journal. I'll say, this is tough. Future self, how does this turn out? And then I'll answer myself and say, hey, 2023, I know it seems crazy, but it's all going to work out. And then sometimes I'll answer that and I'll say, hey, 2024, you were right. It even gets better than you know. And so it's like these different versions of myself talking. And we could expect challenges, but I think I know God works through these challenges to grow us. I say, a lot of times when I'm preaching, I'll say something like, this is the molten metal is when you know that you're finally ready for the hand of the blacksmith. But it takes the heat, it takes the pressure for that warped metal to finally be melted and ready for the hand of the blacksmith, to shape it into what it needs to be, what it's designed to be, what its purpose is. So these trials and whatever challenges we will face, that's what God is using to grow us, to mold us. James 1:2-4 says, he says, count it all joy, my brothers, when we face trials of various kinds. We shouldn't think of the trials themselves as the joy. It's like, yay, joy, joy, I'm going through this tough time. But you should count it as joy because through that comes the endurance and the maturity. So there isn't a question if you will face challenges this year. You will. The question is, will you grow from them? Will you choose to let that trial grow you? And then number 10, only a few will hear this. Not everyone. I've tried to make all of these for everyone, but not everyone will hear this one. Keep an eternal perspective. Life is short, but eternity is long. Not everyone will believe that, but Christians, speaking to you, this year will be another year to live with heaven in mind, making decisions that echo throughout eternity, not just what makes us feel good right now. And for those that don't share that same faith, you could ask this. I wouldn't be mad about it if you asked, what kind of legacy am I leaving behind? What are the legacy decisions I'm making for my kids? What are the legacy decisions I'm making for my brand new career? What are the legacy decisions I'm making for this person I'm dating? Is this just sport dating for fun right now? Or am I thinking long-term? And when I'm talking long-term and you're dating, I'm not just talking about marriage so that you're happy. I'm talking about children. I'm talking about the fruit of your life, the arrows from your quiver, the continuation of your Father's name. You can think of it in that way. Your legacy. What legacy do you want to leave behind? And that makes up my 10 here. I didn't think too much on this, y'all. I didn't. This is not something that I've been working on for the last 6 months. These are very general. There's not really an order besides number 1, start with a foundation that lasts. But other than that, you could put those out of order, and then comment below if you're listening on a platform that allows comments. Comment and let me know what you think of this list, what you would add to this list, what you disagree with on this list. And perhaps I would listen back to this and want to correct myself too, because this is all on the fly. So maybe I would want to listen back and go, I think I could have tweaked that a little bit better. But hopefully this is a good way to kick us off into the year and to maybe spur a couple questions that you could ask. podcast@grangersmith.com. I sure love y'all. I'm glad to be with you another year. See you next Monday. Yee. Thanks for joining me on the Granger Smith podcast. I appreciate all of you guys. You could help me out by rating this podcast on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that little like button and the notifications bell so that you never miss any time I upload a video. Yee.